Hi, this is Jan Rose Distel, and you are listening to the Bewildered Boomer Chick's Guide to Money. Secrets to creating a peace of mind lifestyle after 50, even if you're starting at zero. And today, my guest is Linda Matthew. Linda has not one, but 2 degrees from MIT. She is passionate about being a personal finance coach who helps people figure out where they are financially and where they would like to be and how to get there. But before she decided to go into the personal finance coaching, she worked for 20 years as an electronics engineer and analyst. And since 2006, she is also trained in emotional healing and individual and group counseling methods. And it is this work that guides her money sessions. She is fascinated by the role that emotions play in our money and the complex dynamics that it brings into relationships. Linda's greatest goal is to help people find a grounded place to deal with their finances, to move beyond the fear, and even to find the humor in our craziness. Linda has a new class starting online this Thursday, May 21st. And if you would like more information, check www.moneymindful.org or email her at linda@moneymindful.org. Linda, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So here you have these, not 1, but 2 degrees from MIT, 20 years working at a very high level in terms of high tech, and then you decide that you want to go into personal finance coaching, non-credentialed, and that you really want to make use of your emotional work that you've done. Now, where is this all coming from? What's guiding you?
Well, the engineering background and training that I have, it's a wonderful thing because I get the opportunity to use numbers and to sort of, one thing I love to do is to take a pile of numbers and then get information from them and say, okay, well, what do these tell us? What can we learn that we didn't know before? How are we better off than we were before we looked at this pile of numbers? So that's one thing. And the piece that I found was missing was the opportunity to work with people and the opportunity to really feel as if I was making a difference at the personal level. So that's the piece that I was missing, and that's what I added. I started doing the personal finance coaching a long time ago. It's something that I've always helped my friends with, and so on. And so it's something that's come naturally to me. And then gradually I started to realize the more people that I helped, I saw how, for me, numbers are instinctive, and so it comes easily to me. And I hadn't realized how stressful it can be for somebody when they can't sort that out. And so I was starting to notice how relaxing it was for people and how relieved they were afterwards. And I thought, heavens, this can really make a difference. And that's really where I'm coming from, is the opportunity to really help people to figure out, people going, oh my gosh, where am I? Where am I? I don't know what's going on. And as soon as we can figure that out, it's so relaxing. That's what I always hear from my people, even after the end of just one session. I had a couple who came in last week. They had taken a class, and they decided to do an individual session so that they could go over their individual numbers. And at the beginning, they came in, and I checked with them emotionally. I said, where are you emotionally? And they were both tight, and they were anxious, and they were worried. And at the end, I checked in again, and I said, well, how are you feeling now? And we had just put an hour into it. And he said, well, you know what? I'm feeling excited. And I thought, that's fantastic. What a shift in just an hour. And for her, she said, oh, I'm feeling calm. And, so we had a shift from tight and anxious to excited or calm in just an hour. And that's wonderful.
So can you explain a little bit? I love the combination of that you love to help us find the humor in our craziness. And, money is such a difficult subject.
people tend to carry so much shame about it, which is really sad. I think there's this thing out there in the adult world that somehow we feel as if we're supposed to know about how to manage our money, but we don't know. And then because we don't know and we feel like we're supposed to know, then we feel ashamed. And so there's that cycle. It can be such a serious subject and such a sort of a sad and an uncomfortable subject. And what I find is that once we sit down and we actually start looking at, people's financial situation and particularly our financial behaviors, I mean, just as human beings in general, we can be so crazy. And start noticing our behaviors, but in a way that's not judgmental, in a way that has some compassion associated with it, and it can just make us laugh, if we sit and we think about some of the things we do in life, and particularly in the group classes. That's the wonderful part where people will get together and we have a really good time. And so it shifts when we do this work. It shifts from the shame and the discomfort to a place where we can really have compassion on ourselves, and have compassion on the situation and find a good laugh, even when things aren't quite the way we would want them. And that's a wonderful piece to me.
Yeah. Well, I can certainly relate. I think that those of us who are, again, 50 or over, we have a lot of shoulds in there, that we should be in a better place, that we should have saved more, that we should have known this, that we should have done that. We have probably a history of shoulda, woulda, coulda in there. And then that place where I know for some of us, we're like, oh, what difference is it going to make? I don't have enough money to make any difference.
And, we have the shoulds and we have the should haves and all of those things. A large portion of the people who come to me are about that age, sort of late 40s, 50s, after 50. And the thing that I like about that, and this is where, for example, when we talk about emotions, this is where fear can be useful, where it can actually serve us, is usually when people get to this stage, which is the same stage that I'm at myself. I just had my 52nd birthday. So, yeah, that's a plus and a minus. And, when people come at this point, it's the point where we've got 20, 30 years of our adult lives behind us, and all those things that we were going to do, we haven't, and it's the point where the fear starts to kick in. And that's where it can be really functional, because the fear is what causes us to move forward and say, heavens, I've really got to do something about this because I'm feeling fear. And it gets us to a place of discomfort where we decide to take action. So that's really the nice piece, is that our fear moves us into action, and then we can start looking at things. And the situation I have not yet met a situation that was without hope. Touch wood, that will continue to be the case. But when people come in, then there's always something that we can work at and start putting strategies into place. And a wonderful expression I told you that I heard recently that I really like is, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is today. And, that's just very true. It's always a good time to sit down and evaluate where we are and then decide where we want to go.
And so my understanding is that you definitely, you're in California, you definitely have classes where people come and work with you face-to-face, but you also work very comfortably with people on Skype as well. And if I understood correctly, you were even offering people the opportunity where they could form their own group. So if somebody had a group of friends that really wanted to learn about their finances, et cetera, then you could do it as a group as well. Am I correct in that?
Yes, exactly. And actually, the groups can be a wonderful thing to do. And so if people have a group of people that they'd like to pull together, as long as we have probably 5-6 people, then that's enough to get a class started, and that can be a really good way to learn. And usually what I like to do is go through the whole class. Typically I do a 4 or 5 session class. We can tailor it to people's needs. And then after we do that, or somewhere in the middle, depending on, what the individuals need, then I encourage people also to do an individual session so that we can cover the specifics that are, particular to that person and perhaps not something they would want to go over in a class. So we combine both of those, and it's a wonderful format. As I said, the groups have a lot of fun. We can also cover a lot of material, and it gives people an opportunity to discuss this with somebody else. When you're in the group, then all of a sudden people find that it's okay to talk about money to their group mates, and that can be very freeing. So I offer the groups, and as you said, I do those in person locally. I'm in the Sacramento area, so I do have those here, and then also online for anybody who's elsewhere. And the same for the individual sessions. I can do them in person, locally, or by phone or by Skype, depending on people's preference.
So there could be, how would a group session work when, let's say I'm in the class and I'm just getting back to sea level from having been so far in debt, and yet you have somebody else in the class that, let's say, has a six-figure estate that they're looking at, and they want to know how best to plan from there because they need to shepherd that, or that they need to work with it even better, to make it grow.
Right. That's a very good question. And the classes can be very, very varied. The last one that I just finished up, the youngest person was about 25, and the oldest person was, I think, 72. And we had men and women. We had different economic levels, people who were retired or retiring, people who were working, people who had just starting out, married, engaged, single. We must have had one of everybody. And I find that actually works really well because everybody gets to learn a little piece from everybody else, and they get to see a whole range of different situations and appreciate sort of the different challenges that go with different stages. For example, somebody, say my age in the class, we had a couple of my age in the class, and they can look back at the younger couple and say, oh, I remember that stage. And it helps us have some compassion for ourselves, maybe pat ourselves on the back for the stuff that we did accomplish and say, oh, I remember that. Oh, God, look, we got through that, okay? It was fine. So that's a really wonderful thing to have everybody together and able to learn from one another, and it also helps to develop the compassion for one another. And then the truth is that the basic approach of how we handle our finances, it's the same for everybody, no matter who we are, right? Everybody's got to have some form of income. There's got to be some money coming in from somewhere. And then we have to organize that money. We're going to decide what we're going to spend it on. We have to decide how much we're going to save. And then as we get to the older years, we have to decide how we're going to transition into a retirement lifestyle with Social Security and taking some money from savings or whatever else we have. So the basic approach is the same, no matter who you are and no matter what stage you're in. And it can be really fantastic, for example, for the younger couples or individuals, to be in a room with the older couples and individuals and start to see, oh, this is why this is important. This is why I need to start saving now rather than putting it off for 10 or 20 or 30 years. So everybody learns something from everybody else, and the basic material is the same for everybody.
So how do you work with somebody who feels like they have more months than money each month?
Right. Okay, so the idea for that is what we need to do is start by looking at the state of our finances. And in that case, what we would do is we would sit down and we would take a look at the income, and we would take a look at the outgo, and we would total everything up. And then we would look at it and say, okay, what can we learn from this? And once we have everything down on paper, I have to tell you, a terrible place to manage our money is in our head. For myself, I'm very comfortable with numbers, and I cannot manage my money in my head or manage numbers in my head. It has to be down on a piece of paper. Then we can get a handle on it. And as soon as we do that, things start to become clear and strategies start to become clear. And sometimes what becomes clear is I've got a client that I'm working with right now, and she's put everything down on a piece of paper. And what's become clear to her is she needs to get a higher earning job. Sometimes that's what becomes clear to us. And certainly, she could have the option to move to a place, in her case, and in most of our cases, our largest expense is our housing, the rent or the mortgage or whatever. And in her case, she could take the opportunity and say, well, I'm going to move to a place where I can reduce my rent. But that's not of interest to her. And so when she gets the numbers on a piece of paper, now she can start to make some decisions, say, okay, well, I could reduce my expenses by moving, but you know what? That's not the way I want to live my life. And so what I'm going to pursue instead is I'm going to pursue increasing my income, because now that she's looking at it, and, she's younger, she's in her 40s. Now that she's looking at it, she says, okay, this is what I want to do going forward. So once we get it down on a piece of paper, we can look at it and we can go, aha, then things become clear.
So in the nitty-gritty of things, I was in a 3-day money summit, and one of the suggestions was to actually work with paper and pencil or pen that you physically put in your numbers, because that you have actually more connection than when we put it into a program or in our computer.
Yes, I think that's
any
a very
opinion
good
about
idea.
that?
Yes, definitely. I love paper and pen myself. I do a lot of my own numbers, and I have, it's a family of 4 of us, so it's a relatively complex, or at least a very long set of numbers, let's put it that way, with lots of numbers in the grocery bills especially. But I like to do a lot of my stuff on paper with pen. We do have a better connection to it. And the other thing that it makes us do when we work on paper is it keeps us simple, because you can't get too complex on paper. It just doesn't work very well that way. And my experience is that when we keep something simple, for example, even when I'm working with a computer file, I keep everything on one sheet of paper. So the computer files that I work with my clients on, we can always print out their file on one sheet of paper. So even if we're not using pencil and paper, we can take one sheet of paper and we can look at it and say, yes, that is the situation, and see it very clearly. So I think pen and paper are fantastic things. And I also think that it's really important that everybody work the way that they like to work and the way that they will get it done. So I have some people who work in Excel. Some people use the various computer programs. There are some apps coming out for the phones now that are quite nice and quite simple. Some people work pen and paper, and I have one client which I thought was fabulous. She did her budget. She was really having trouble with this and did not want to do it. And finally she hit on a system, and she said, look, if I do it on multicolored Post-it notes on a whiteboard, then that makes me happy, and I can do that. And that was a form of visualization that worked for her. She sent me a photograph. It was great, all these different colored Post-its, in neat columns with the different categories and so on. It looked wonderful.
That's great. How do you suggest that people track their money on a daily basis, and especially, all those little things that we forget that we actually pay for, in terms of our coffee habits and et cetera?
Right. Well, and there are lots of answers to that. The first thing that I would say is that before we start tracking, it's really important to have a plan and to create a set of goals. So, it's kind of like what I said before. We want to write down our income. People who have a salary are pretty clear on what their income is. Those of us who are self-employed need to sort of make an estimate. But to write down our what we expect our income to be every month, and then to make a list of what our expenses are and to make sure that everything fits. So the first thing is to have a plan. And then once we've done that, then we can start tracking our expenses to see if we really are hitting the plan. And again, there are many ways to do it. Some people will collect up a whole bunch of receipts, and actually this is what we do in my house. We just, like I said, pen and paper, we save the receipts. And at the end of the week, then we write them all down, and you can categorize them into different categories. Some people will download their bank statement at the end of the month and total it up that way, because if you're using a debit card, then you can pretty much see. You can say, oh, well, this purchase was made at the grocery store, so therefore it must be groceries. So some people do it that way and categorize it that way. there's a wonderful new phone application out now called youneedabudget.com. And for people, it's a wonderful site. I love their stuff. Would highly recommend it as a starting point. And you put this app on your phone, and anytime you spend something, you just tap it into your phone, and voila, it's done. No receipts, no tracking, no end of the month sit down, no nothing. So that's fantastic for people who like to do things that way.
So tell me again. It's you, as in YOU, needabudget.com?
You got it.
Okay, I will definitely, because my smartphone is my best friend in terms of I keep everything, and they've done tracking saying people would be willing to give up their computer before their smartphone, and I'm definitely one of those people.
Well, then this application was written for you, definitely. And it's a fantastic website. The software that you load, I forget the price, but it's affordable. I won't give a guess in case I get it wrong on record, but it is affordable. And it really is a wonderful program. And the other thing that I want to mention in terms of our tracking is cash, because cash is a tricky thing. And so what I like to do with cash is get out a fixed amount from the ATM every week. So my husband and I sit down and we decide in our budget what's an appropriate amount. It's kind of like our pocket money in a sense. It's like our allowance. We decide what's an appropriate amount for our budget at the beginning of the year. We say, okay, how much is he going to get on Friday, and how much am I going to get on Friday? And we take that out from the ATM, that fixed amount, every Friday. And then it just goes into our tracking as cash. We don't bother to record who bought a muffin and who bought a cup of coffee and, who bought a treat for the child or whatever. And that can simplify things, because for myself, and again, it depends on the person. I have plenty of my clients who don't track that way. They track every penny. But for me, I don't want to be tracking muffins and cups of coffee. I'm quite happy to just have that category as cash and have sort of a vague idea of where it went. It's in my budget. It's identified. It's a fixed amount. We're not going to go beyond the amount. So that's another way to do it.
Interesting. And tell me how, I've been married twice. I'm living with my partner now. And, as the love and respect and appreciation brought us together. And then we also find that we have different views on how we spend money, why we spend money, why we save money, what is really important to us, etc. Risk tolerance. I found that out with my second husband, that he was much more comfortable with I thought I was a fairly good risk tolerance person, but he definitely tested that one, and I definitely recognized that he had much, much, much higher tolerance for risk than I did.
Right.
So how do you work with couples or, partnerships?
Yes, and I love working with couples because it almost always brings out this dynamic, and for some reason we always seem to choose our opposites. So then we have this, let's call it an opportunity to really explore how to be in partnership. And the way that I've learned to look at it in my own marriage, and like you, I've been married multiple times. So the way that I've learned to look at it this go around, which is working a lot better, is that my husband and I, because we're opposites, we're also complements. And so he's got a particular range of skills and traits, and then I've got a different range of skills and traits. And so if you add those two up, we've actually got a pretty comprehensive range of skills and traits between the two of us. So if I can remember to keep myself in that frame of mind, the alternative, if I forget that, is because he's my opposite, I just want to kill him. And that's, not very useful in a marriage. So so that's the trick, really, finances, is to leverage those two different sets of things. So, for example, in my relationship, he's very interested in investments, in stocks and stock markets, and that is something that I have a really hard time persuading myself to get excited about. So that's lovely. He does all the investment research, and then he brings ideas to me, and he says, look, I found this, and we could do that, and we could do the other, and all I have to do is kind of sign off on the ideas that I like best. And then on the other hand, I'm a detail person, and I love to do things like balance checkbooks and total up columns and numbers, and he can't stand that. So I take that function, and so that's an example of how you can use the skills as complements. And what I find when I'm working with couples, there are usually things that we have to work out along those lines, and there are often discussions that we need to have between the partners, because particularly if people have been together a long time, there are years or even decades of emotions that have been swept under the rug or ignored or turned away from, and so often we have to work through those in order to get the partnership working better together. And what's really nice.
That's a delicate conversation.
Sorry, what's that?
That would be a delicate conversation.
It can be a very interesting conversation, and that can also be, one of those times where we wind up laughing, because whether our feeling is anger or our feeling is sadness, the feeling of happiness isn't very far away. So it seems to me that any emotion, once we get into our emotions, it could really, whether we're expressing anger or sad or happy, they're very close to one another. And so we do wind up laughing a lot with that as well. And one of my clients told me one time, this was one of the highest compliments I got. She said, "You're a better marriage counselor than our marriage counselor." So I love that. And, if we, so often when we're in partnership, it can be unconscious or it can be kind of hidden, but often the partners will be pulling in opposite directions. Whether it's intentionally or unconscious, it doesn't really matter. And needless to say, if we've got two partners pulling in opposite directions, we're just not going to get very far in the direction that we want to go. So if we work together with partners, then we can get the two partners aligned and pulling in the same direction, and you would be amazed at the difference it makes in terms of where people can get.
No, I can appreciate that, because I certainly know pulling in opposite directions didn't get me very far. So
no, or the marriage.
Yeah. I have a question though for you, because this is something that I'm coming across, and that is that a lot of the women that I know defer to their partners to handle the finances. So it is not a joint venture. They might handle the household finances and pay the checks, pay the bills and all of that. But when it comes to the larger issues of insurance and investments and making those choices, they have deferred and said, "Oh, you like to do that, you handle it, I don't really want to know about it." And then the divorce or the widowhood comes about, and they are dealing with all of that, sometimes for the first time, in a very awful situation when their emotions are already charged.
Yes. And there's of course, there's an argument for learning this stuff as early as possible to help us, and sometimes it just doesn't work that way. And I think that it is natural, kind of what I just said, at the beginning of our marriage or an adult life or whatever, we kind of move towards our strengths, and we do things from our strengths, and often we forget that we haven't worked with the parts of ourselves that are not quite so strong. And so we'll tend to rely on our strengths and sort of ignore the rest and move further and further from it. And that can certainly happen with money management. And so I was telling you about the way my husband and I work together. Every once in a while we switch things up, and he balances the checkbook. And I research the investments, and it's not a comfortable experience for either of us. But sometimes the things that are smart are not always comfortable. And so it is good to switch it up. And then, there's another piece. I'm dealing with a client right now, and she's starting to look at her finances and take some responsibility. And what she's identified is that there's a piece of her that's kind of waiting for somebody else to show up and take care of her. So at some level, she really likes to be taken care of, and she's in a situation right now where she has a money negotiation, and the other person is just sitting there, is not stepping forward with a proposal or doing anything, and so she's being forced to do it herself. And again, it's a very uncomfortable situation for her, but what she's getting to see is how she likes to sit and wait, and also how that has not served her in terms of taking care of herself and in terms of putting her own needs first and looking after herself. So there can be a lot, it's almost like a growing up process. And like I said, it can be uncomfortable, but it's still very important, and we're so much better off when we get to the other side of that. And, for somebody who's in that situation, that's when it can really help to have a coach or to have somebody else who helps you through that and can stand by your side as you go through it and reassure you, it'll be okay. These are the normal emotions. This won't last forever. Here's how you move forward. So that can be very helpful to have somebody helping you with it.
So let's segue right into what is your offer for us, for our community here, so that we can take advantage of your wonderful sense of numbers, your great perspective, and some of the game plans that you can give to us. So how do we work with you?
Yes, I would love to hear from anybody who's interested. My website, MoneyMindful.org, is the best place to find my contact info, or people could email me at linda@moneymindful.org. So those are the best ways to reach me, and what I offer is a free 30-minute consultation. So if somebody would like to get in touch, they can give me a call and take some time just to let me know what they're wrestling with, and then I can give them some outlines of how we could approach that. So that's available for free, and anybody's welcome to give me a call or drop me an email. My number, if people want to call, is 530-220-3369, and as I said, that's in the area of Sacramento, California. And we could set up individual sessions by phone or in person. We could put together a group if that's of interest to somebody. There are many different possibilities. But the first thing to do is give me a call, and let's talk about what's going on with you.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I urge everyone, again, this is someone who is offering their time. They are, whatever your situation is, and take advantage of learning how different people operate so you can make the best choices for yourself of whether you want to work with somebody like Linda and get yourself in a place where then you might work with somebody who is a certified financial planner, because you have much more of a game plan at that point, and Linda is a fabulous person to get you to that place. She really understands how to get yourself from A, no matter where A is, to a good B, so that you can position yourself. Thank you, Linda, for taking the time and your whole generosity of spirit. I really appreciate it, and I know I'm going to take advantage of having a session with you, that's for sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Have a great rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Oh, and the same to you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.